Story 1. It feels nice to have a large amount of money in your bank account. Not because I want to spend it, but because knowing you can resolve most issues that arise is comforting compared with knowing you would be in serious trouble if you were broke or poor. Story 2. My dad grew up in a two-room house and slept on the floor next to the fireplace. He said he never thought he would live in a brick house because only rich people lived in them. He went to law school, became the senior partner in his firm, and started a chain of banks in Texas with other investors. He is the most frugal man in the world because those early memories are still etched in his mind. I asked him your question once, and he said it was the way people treat you. He grew up poor and people treated him as poor white trash. Once he became important, he said it was like entering a completely different world, even though he was the same person. I think in his mind he is still that poor kid. Story 3. My partner's family is comfortable. Having grown up middle class at best and poor at worst, I am amazed at how easily they spend money. I do not mean that they waste it. If their car or home needs repairs, they take care of it promptly. If they need to see a doctor, they make an appointment and go. If they need something for their home, they buy it. They do all this without having to rearrange their bills to cover unexpected costs. Story 4. I went from being poor to having more money than I knew what to do with. The most surprising thing was realizing how exhausting it was to constantly shop for the best deal. I realized I needed a high-definition multimedia interface cable, and I just walked into a store and bought one. There was no weighing whether it was worth spending more or whether a cheap one would last long enough. No searching multiple stores. Did I overpay? Probably. But not having to waste time searching for the best deal was worth it. Story 5. How far behind are poor people compared to rich people from birth? It was eye-opening to see my wife's childhood compared to mine. Story 6. Everything is fine now. I grew up middle class and did not worry about money. As an adult, I spent 4 years deep in debt with almost no income and mounting bills. When I was broke, I became obsessed with my mailbox. Each day, I feared finding letters full of bills I could not afford. I got through it and now I enjoy my mail. Story 7. That money buys time, and time equals happiness. Not having to be on anybody's schedule other than mine is the biggest benefit wealth buys. Story 8. How quickly people get used to luxury. They are very thankful for everything at first, and then they can become petty very quickly. Story 9. Lifestyle inflation is a real phenomenon, but on the flip side, life can be cheaper when you have more money. There is an old adage that expensive boots are cheaper than inexpensive ones over a lifetime. Expensive boots cost less in the long run than constantly replacing cheap boots. That idea applies to many things. With more money, you can buy higher quality items, obtain better credit and lower interest rates, and associate with people who have wealth, often professionals and business owners. That network provides referrals and favors. An attorney who gives free advice, a business owner who offers a friend discount, invitations to watch games from a suite at no cost, and access to other people's vacation homes at the beach or ski resort. I was surprised by how much free entertainment and other benefits simply happen. The more money you have, the easier it is to make more. The more you invest, the more you gain, and investment opportunities arise through that network and so on. Story 10. I grew up in poverty and married into generational wealth. Life is much easier when all your needs are met. Story 11. Money does make you happier. Anyone who says otherwise is evading taxes by using a tax haven. Story 12. I became disabled, and a lawsuit settlement followed. My ex-husband told me he wanted a divorce the same day we were informed of the proposed settlement. I did not realize I was so easily sold. Story 13. Becoming financially comfortable made me realize how much of my personality was survival mode. When I left that state, I had to relearn who I was without constant stress. Story 14. I was much happier when I had money and did not have to worry all the time. Story 15. Maybe I'm not qualified to answer. I don't think we are rich, but my past self would have thought so. We are much better off than before, but we used to live paycheck to paycheck to get where we are. I'm mostly surprised that now, when I finally have money in the bank, I've lost the urge to spend it. I was much more reckless with money when I didn't have it. I would overspend and figure it out later. I used to charge all my cards at Christmas trying to compensate, but now I don't spend that way. I don't buy a bunch of things I don't need every time I go to the store. Walmart and Costco were like casinos for me. I had no idea whether I would spend $100 or $500 when I walked in. I used to order from Amazon constantly. Now I put things in the cart, and when I get paid, I review the cart and eliminate impulse purchases. I don't go to those stores and buy everything I think is cute, and I don't fill the walls of my new house just to have something there. I wait until I really love something. It's been 2 years and I still have many blank areas. Story 16. I grew up so poor that if I did not catch a fish, we had no protein for dinner. I decided I did not want to live like that, so I did all the right things and got very lucky with my career, right place, right time. To my 15-year-old self, I am very rich. Compared to Bill Gates, I am nothing, but perspective matters. It turns out I need a certain amount of money to have a chance at happiness. Enough to guarantee comfortable, if not luxury housing, a fridge full of food, a couple of beers, a new book or video game every month or so, the ability to take time off work without needing a side hustle, and a reliable vehicle. Call that number $40,000 a year. After trips to the food bank and working 14 to 16-hour days while going to school to try to break free from poverty. Once I reached $40,000 a year, my mental health improved dramatically. I could take an urban hike, ride transit to the end of the line and walk back, find a neat coffee shop and read for an hour, then carry on. Now I earn several times that baseline, but my happiness has not increased proportionally compared with how I felt 25 years ago when I broke out of poverty. The takeaway is that you need a base amount of money to avoid misery, but after that first large step, the gains taper off. What surprises me most is that people born into my current tax bracket do not comprehend how good they have it. They are terrified of losing their position, and that fear makes them easy to manipulate, whether through advertising or by convincing them that the poor are coming for what they have. Story 17. We did not go from very rich to poor. We went from doing fine to poor. What surprised me most was how rapid that change was. I experienced it as the child of parents who lost their savings when their business went belly up. One moment we were living in a house, the next we were foreclosed on and evicted. It was a struggle to get back on our feet, and I learned to make do. We never became homeless, but we had a hard time paying bills for a few years. I developed a mild habit of hoarding food, which I try to keep at bay. Sometimes I open the pantry and it looks like a squirrel's stash, and I have to take items to the food bank and donate them. What surprised me most was how isolated we became. You can have friends with similar means when you are doing well, but after a financial crisis you end up pretty much alone. Family and friends go quiet. They feel awkward, and your failure makes them uncomfortable. You lose not only money but also your network because you cannot afford subscription fees you were not aware you were paying. Story 18. Having money gives you leverage in your work relationships. I draw clear boundaries and treat conversations with leadership as business transactions. I often say I understand if something does not work for leadership and that we may need to move in different directions. I would not do this without some financial cushioning. Story 19. 99% of the responses here describe people going from poor to rich, or at least becoming very comfortable. I have a dear friend in her late 50s who has had the opposite experience. She grew up in the country club lifestyle. Her father was a doctor and her mother was a stay-at-home mother in the 1960s to 1970s. They never wanted for anything. Her mother could shop without limits and they took fancy vacations several times a year. My friend married young to a financial planner who was good at spending money to keep up with the Joneses and who managed multi-million-dollar accounts. Essentially, he spent it all and left no real savings or investments for his family. He kept a standing appointment at the local golf club and would arrive in his new Mercedes. When her father died, she received an inheritance that was meant to pay for her children's college, and he spent that too. The kids graduated but now have student loans they would not have had without his frivolous spending. She divorced him about 10 years ago and received alimony for only about 5 years after more than 20 years of marriage. She now rents a room and works a low-paying job because she does not have the bandwidth to pursue a demanding career at age 55. She barely makes enough to pay her bills and has nothing extra. The children understand, but it is still painful compared with the lifestyle they grew up with. They are all in their 20s and trying to make their way. They do not ask her for money except for small things, like a pizza or an occasional birthday outing. The situation deeply upsets her. Her choice of a narcissistic husband when she was very young continues to cause pain for her and her children. Her ex-husband has remarried a woman who does not care for his children. He chose his own gratification over his kids. Being poor is difficult. Let this be a lesson to young people. Do not marry someone who is flashy and constantly needs the latest car or a flashy watch. That behavior can lead to poverty and a lack of savings or investments later in life. Story 20. The richer you are, the easier it is to stay rich. It is just absurd. Story 21. I am not rich, but I am in a higher financial bracket than ever before. What surprised me is that I still feel the need to hoard money, so I fix things with duct tape or super glue instead of replacing them until I absolutely have to. I have sewn the couch cushions back together several times. Now the couch is in such bad condition that I need a new one, but I still hesitate even though I can afford it. Story 22. From rich to poor. It's amazing how quickly so-called good friends disappear. Very few truly stay. I have an excellent bullshit detection system, and I use it well. Story 23. Just how many people and services line up for your business when you are not poor anymore, and how much more convenient life becomes. Suddenly you are being courted by nearly every company everywhere. They really want your business and are willing to do almost anything to get it. They give you a dedicated account manager, and you have that person's cell phone number. Need something? You are not sitting through hold music, you call your contact, tell them in a single sentence what you want, and they get it done. This applies to everything from banking to the motorcycle repair shop. It is pretty nice, I have to say. I do not know if I would consider myself rich, but my bank account has 2 commas in it, just barely. Apparently that is enough to trigger an algorithm at many service companies, because suddenly I am getting treated far better than I ever did before. Story 24. I wasn't born rich, but I benefited from the coronavirus disease 2019 real estate boom at the right time. I was young and unmarried and had no children. I will never forget how grateful I am to be able to fill my car's gas tank or go to the grocery store and buy what I want. However, I cannot waste money. Once, after a very good paycheck, I went to a nice mall and told myself I could spend $5,000 on anything I wanted. I walked out after spending about $120. I just could not do it. Nothing felt worth it to me. Even most designer stores rely mostly on brand name and exploitative labor. Something has to be very high quality for me to spend money on. Although I am grateful to be able to buy what I want, I am the person who checks grocery prices and will walk away from an item because of the price. I do the main grocery shopping and tell my husband all the time, "We are not buying this here. It's too expensive, and I can buy it elsewhere for $2 less." Story 25. A childhood friend struggled with poverty through his early 30s. He was always involved in politics but never received lasting rewards. He held only a few low-level positions that ended whenever local government changed. He was a loud, fun guy, a little too blunt for some, but I always liked him. At one point, he was appointed to a position handling water rights permits. He learned the processes, quit, and began helping agronomists obtain water rights permits that could otherwise languish for decades, getting them approved within months. Needless to say, the money came rushing in. Trips, women, gambling, a poor-quality film production, ranches, and restaurant ventures followed. That lasted for about a decade. Now he's broke again and in debt. I don't think he can accept that he may have to scale back to where he was 10 to 15 years ago. He's trying to get it all back with a few trusted people. He's a good-hearted guy and still a friend. Story 26. Before my parents divorced when I was 10, we lived in a modest home in a small village that was considered quite elite. I had horse riding lessons, and we visited relatives in the United States every other year. Whenever anyone learned where I lived, they were impressed, and that was reflected in the way they treated me. After my parents' divorce, that changed overnight when my mother and I moved to a council estate. It was a culture shock. There were no more holidays, and we did not fit in around there. It was hellish. One of the worst things was how differently some people treated me when they found out where I lived, despite my being the same well-dressed, polite girl I had always been. At a young age, I learned a great deal about how society treats people who have fallen on hard times, and it has shaped who I am now, both positively and negatively. Story 27. Genuine connection with people always brings the most value, no matter your status. Story 28. It helps 95% of the time, don't get me wrong, but when you grow up thinking if you were just rich everything would be better and then finally achieve that goal yet still feel sad, lonely, or depressed, it can be very jarring. A real hopelessness can set in, and it is often paired with crippling guilt. How can I still feel so bad when I am so fortunate? It is not a sob story anyone wants to hear. Story 29. I had a friend whose parents were wealthy when we were young, more than 20 years ago. Her father sold his business and started a new one that did not do well. He invested all the family money in it until they had nothing left, or so she told me. She often complained about the gifts her family gave and how much they helped or did not help her financially. Her parents still managed to send her on trips overseas, so I questioned her definition of poor. She became a frequent complainer and believed the world owed her after her father's company went bust. Story 30. Going from broke to stable. My brain needed time to learn that rest is allowed. I kept feeling guilty any time I was not working or hustling. Story 31. Money solves many problems I did not expect, leaves others unresolved that I thought it would fix, and creates issues I did not anticipate or prepare for. Story 32. I haven't gone from one extreme to another, but from poverty to being able to take care of myself without thinking much about money. The most surprising thing is how quiet life becomes. Poverty is constant noise. Problems that once required a lot of struggle no longer occur and are reduced to minor inconveniences. The anxiety about being poor does not vanish. I still worry that something unexpected will happen and I'll be back to square one. Story 33. Praise others publicly, but undermine them behind closed doors. Story 34. I was dirt poor. I enlisted in the military and did my time, then transferred to an A-team unit in Virginia. I left the military and started a private military company, which I sold for 8 figures. The rest is history. I built my portfolio from there and have done extremely well. Now I live in Australia. Now that I am wealthy, one thing I realized is how few people actually build or make anything. 99.5% of wealthy people I associate with never got there on their own. It is an ecosystem built on parents' or grandparents' money to get a leg up. Maybe 1 in 20 rich people I meet actually do hard work to justify their status, and they often come off as arrogant because of it. But what really woke me up was how much it was not worth it. I created a new company in Australia and was doing over $30 million in annual contracts, but it was not worth it when I stopped seeing my children. I have noticed wealthy people have an inability to turn it off. It is never enough. I know a man who has over $100 million in liquid assets, yet he still works 90-hour weeks and never sees his family. You need to learn to let go when you become wealthy. I learned the hard way when my children stopped inviting me to school functions. That was when I stepped back and became a father. Story 35. Poverty often becomes a cycle because of generational trauma and fear. As I have gotten older, I have learned more about my parents' substance abuse and mistakes. If you can break out of cycles of pain and learn to be okay, things will work out. Money cannot fix those internal problems, which is why many sudden wealth or rags to riches stories are tragic. Working on trauma and internal pain pays better dividends, emotionally and financially, than almost anything else. Story 36. First, I'm not very rich. Those people live in a different world. I'm still down here with the rest of us money grubbers, working for pay. Second, I'm near the top of the stack. Not because I make an enormous amount, but because I don't spend everything, and yes, I make what most people would call a lot of money. Now I'm starting to spend it, which brings different problems. The biggest change from when I was poor and kept the thermostat at 58 degrees, grateful just to have an indoor place to sleep, is freedom from constant worry about basic expenses. What surprised me was finally not having to worry about car repairs and tires. New tires? I buy them. My wife doesn't like her car? I buy a different one. I still refuse to buy new cars. They depreciate too quickly, insurance costs are too high, and in my state license plates for a $50,000 car cost more than $1,250 a year. I spend a lot, but I like value for my money. No worries about food. Mortgage and auto are paid from my checking account, as are most bills. I try to keep the working account above $5,000. If we get cold, I set the thermostat to 74 or 76. We have a way of life set below our means. As long as we stick to that, we literally don't worry about money. It's not about having what you want. It's about adjusting what you want to what you have. What surprised me is that we can do what we want and I can pay all the bills at the end of the month. That's cool. Now I have one big toy. I waited 65 years to buy it. I bought it with cash and pay the bills with cash. It's a 60-foot, round-the-world, blue-water yacht. I didn't like paying people $200 an hour to wrench on it, so now I live on it 2 weeks a month and do the maintenance myself. For serious work, I hire a diesel mechanic. I worry about where to park the boat and how to keep it from rotting. G.D. McDonald said it best. Nothing rots faster than a boat on the water. Story 37. It is all in assets and stuff, so I still feel kind of poor, but I am not. Story 38. I went from below or around the poverty line to well above it in a month. Even friends noticed how much more relaxed and happier I was. Money does buy happiness because you can just do what you need to do. A $200 purchase is just a purchase now. It used to take months and a lot of justification. Story 39. I think that money is like sex and oxygen. After a certain point, it's not a big deal. But when you aren't getting any, it's a really big deal. Story 40. People at all levels of society share the same basic personality types. Aggressive, passive, quiet, talkative, trustworthy, or untrustworthy. While cultural differences exist, the fundamentals of human interaction are similar. Story 41. It does not matter how much money you have. Most people are still insecure. Story 42. I had a sudden windfall and did not expect how it would change my priorities. I had been in an I need to grind to have enough savings before I can do anything else with my life mode, and that kept me content at my job. I was genuinely okay with it. It was not that, on the day of the windfall, I wanted to change jobs. After a few weeks, I began to hate my job and feel undervalued, as if I were wasting my time, because I now had enough money to go back to college and pursue a higher-paying career. Similarly, I did not want to be involved in holiday activities because they would distract me from the grind. After the windfall, giving back and buying gifts became spiritually important because it felt undeserved. Story 43. I grew up without running water. 30, I was rich. At 50, I am poor. The stress changes. Being poor is awful, but stress is present no matter what. Story 44. Years ago, I read that rather than work harder or longer, you need to be able to make money while you sleep. Investing is the answer. Stop buying consumables and other short-term items for immediate reward and invest in shares, real estate, and tax-advantaged superannuation and similar vehicles. I used to check the price tag first. Now it is the last thing I look at. Story 45. What surprises me most is the contrast between an abundance mindset and a scarcity mindset. When you have money, you tend toward an abundance mindset, feeling you can buy or discard things because they are readily available and accessible. Story 46. I am not very rich. I have gone from very poor to average. I can hang out with friends at social events, go to the bar or out to dinner, and not panic about my budget or have to order only water and chips. Story 47. I want to say that I like not worrying about the cost of groceries. Whole Foods is no problem. I went from lower middle class or upper poor to lower upper class, so perhaps I am not quite what the original poster is looking for. Story 48. I came from the working class. My husband came from abject poverty. We are middle class. We have no financial worries. I have been near homeless and arrested for driving without insurance and for a bounce check, and I experienced many of the difficulties that come with being flat broke. What surprises us and what we are grateful for is that we never talk about finances. It is not a worry or a concern. Neither of us is frivolous, and we never police each other. Bills arrive and are paid. If the car needs new brakes, we make an appointment. Nothing is postponed or left unpaid. If something breaks, we can hire a professional to fix it. Those years of constant stress are gone. It is amazing. I can hardly believe this is our life. Story 49. I will always consider myself one bad decision or one unexpected circumstance away from being poor again. Story 50. I was poor until I married my husband, and many of my problems disappeared or could be solved quickly. Money stress is gone. My car broke down and was beyond repair, but I could buy a new one. I did not like my job, so I quit. I did not need the money. Story 51. There is a huge difference in mindset between making money, being rich, and having someone give you money. Story 52. I'm not rich, but I'm comfortably middle class for the first time. I can factor in qualities that are not just price. This fall, I decided to de-emphasize my smartphone and buy a feature phone and a handheld gaming console. In addition to the price, I thought about whether they were attractive, enjoyable, durable, and easy to accessorize. I remember when my daughter was an infant, we were so poor I wanted to buy $1 of blue nail polish at my local dollar store, and we could not afford it. I cried. I just wanted blue nails. Now I have matched my phone to my handheld, both with matching cases. Feels kind of nice. I'm also surprised by how awkward it feels to be one of those families that invests in their children. My parents grew up poorer than I did, so being poor in the 1990s was not that bad to them. Their attitude was to go to the regular public school in our not great neighborhood because it was free, use free services when available, and avoid the doctor unless necessary. My goal was to advance in my career so my daughter would have good opportunities, and we've been able to help her pursue whatever she wants. But wow, I really do not fit in with the other families. I'm just like, yes, I'm pretty close in age to my daughter. I'm not sure what you want me to do about it. Laughing out loud. Story 53. Nothing much has changed. My watch is worth more than my car used to be, and I think about that sometimes. I still just work, drink, and laugh about it. Story 54. I am not very rich, but I am probably in the top 5% for my age. The main thing is knowing I will never be hungry again. I do not have to worry about bills, losing my house, or similar concerns. We are frugal, and I do not care about appearing wealthy, but it is reassuring to know I could stop working for 3 years without changing my lifestyle at all. I am a little worried about how my children will view money, but I would rather they have too much than too little. Postscript. I highly recommend reprogramming the messaging that money is bad, that rich people are bad or weak, or that being poor is noble. Story 55. I would not say I was rich, but going from a broke college student who ate ramen noodles for every meal to landing a great job was almost jarring. It felt like, okay, I actually have money to do things now. This is crazy. Story 56. I went from being poor to reasonably comfortable. Not having food insecurity was a relief. I could buy items impulsively without worrying about breaking the bank and prioritize comfort over the price. Story 57. People treat you differently once they learn you receive special treatment. They act like friends and then ask you to invest with them. Story 58. I am not even close to very rich by most standards, but my younger self would have considered me rich. I am just comfortable. Money is not my constant worry. I will never fit in. My values are much more centered on giving than on taking. Yet everyone still assumes I am a gold digger. People who have less are more trustworthy. Story 59. Not extremely rich, just comfortably upper income. 2 people earning over $200,000. What I realized, and had never really thought about before, was how much less stress I have. I was a typical broke 20-something. I budgeted and was very frugal until I eventually got a good grown-up job. I remember when I had enough money that I could go to the grocery store and buy almost anything I wanted. I felt rich. Switching away from frugality was really hard. I felt guilty spending on anything not absolutely necessary, which made it hard to enjoy the money. When we started dating, my husband helped me get over that. He made fun of my shoes and clothes with holes in them and made me realize I was being ridiculous. Now I have almost nothing with holes, only a few, because I do not enjoy shopping and tend to only go when it becomes critical. Story 60. They went from eating ramen with ketchup packets to having a personal chef. The most shocking part is that rich people's toilet paper is just as flammable. Story 61. The mental energy required to avoid an overdraft, putting off paying one bill to avoid being late on another, and knowing you can't afford an unexpected expense like a flat tire or a health issue was unimaginably awful. That stress is now in the rearview mirror. Story 62. Saving money is hard. You can scrimp for a couple of years, and just when you have enough to buy something important, something breaks and you have to spend the money on repairs. I know this is temporary, but it is an eye-opening experience. Story 63. I grew up very poor and later became upper middle class. I was amazed at how much less I worried about getting enough to eat and how much easier life was overall with a decent family income. Story 64. Before I left my job because of an acquisition, I had a decent amount of money in my bank account. A year later, I am broke, depressed, and spend all day introspecting or daydreaming. The future looks bleak and I am contemplating whether to keep living. That is how bad it is. The surprise is the job market. I did not know it was this bad. I thought I would land a job within 3 to 6 months. That never happened. Time is just flying by and nothing is turning up. No interviews, no responses, only rejection emails here and there. The only thought on repeat is that if I had not quit that terrible job, I would have a year's salary saved now, which would be a large amount of money. If you are thinking about harming yourself or are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number now. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are outside the United States, please contact your local emergency services or a local crisis line. It might help to reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or a mental health professional. If you want, I can help you find resources, draft messages for potential employers, or edit this text further. Story 65. Having money gives you choices, and you can buy the life you want. This may sound superficial, but it is much better than working nonstop for 20 to 30 years to achieve it. When you start making good money, give some back to help someone else achieve a better life. Story 66. Since no one has brought it up yet, I will mention flying business class. Story 67. You will not do all of the generous things you think you would if you had money because you do not understand how it changes your brain. Story 68. The financial skills you have at a given annual income do not necessarily transfer to a higher income. You often have to spend money to continue making money. For example, I cannot do certain tasks for $25 per hour any longer because that rate undercuts my current rate of $225 per hour. The amounts are facetious. Time is money. Story 69. From poverty to wealth and back again. I am surprised by how often I feel that life is worthless. Story 70. I was very uncomfortable with money when I was struggling. If I received money through a bonus or a tax refund, I immediately thought about what to spend it on. For a long time I used it to pay down debt, but now bonuses go directly into savings. Since I am financially comfortable, I save a lot, max out my 401k retirement plan, and try to save at least a year's worth of expenses so I can retire early. I am still somewhat frugal and drive an older car because I am practical. I love to travel, and when I am with my children, I do not worry about the cost of dinners, shows, or other entertainment. Story 71. What I once thought of as a lot of money is not really a lot of money. Do not get me wrong, it is life-changing. But I still have to go to work every day for the next 20 years. Story 72. I was an immigrant with just a suitcase. I worked my way through school and made a fortune by my late 20s. I am in my 50s now. I am still a poor kid at heart, so I spend most of my money helping others. I have not forgotten what it is like to struggle. I have little interest in modern riches. Story 73. After 2 divorces, I was left paying off a lot of debt. I finally dug myself out 2 years ago. Now I have a good balance in my checking account, and it is so nice to be able to buy lunch occasionally. Shawarma for $11? Why not? Tacos? Sure thing. I had to bring my car in for a tire swap and a checkup this week. Cost more than $200, which I paid directly from my account. I am not very rich, but it is nice to be comfortable, and I am used to living fairly frugally. Story 74. Besides money no longer being an issue, people treat you differently. I live more than half the time in an upscale gated community in Southern California, where the smallest homes are over $5 million and range up to $45 million, with yearly fees starting at about $70,000. The community concierge arranges virtually anything: running errands, driving you to the store, or checking your house when you are away. If you are not home, gate staff accept packages and security places them inside your house. If you need to fly somewhere in a rush or under special circumstances, you can hire the club plane and pilot. There are 2 very nice restaurants on the grounds, each with valet parking. There is a gym, a pool, although most houses have their own, trainers, golf, tennis, and pickleball coaches, and 2 9-hole golf courses. On the grounds, no one ever pays with cash or with credit cards. Staff know members by sight, and anything you want is charged to your account. Cost plus a 30% convenience fee. This is an enormously convenient bubble, protected from virtually every downside. A Reddit commenter was absolutely right. People treat you differently. That can be negative. There is a feeling that when ordinary people know how much you have, they want some of it. Unless someone asks directly and I cannot avoid answering, I do not tell casual acquaintances where I live, and I do not wear shirts or hats with logos because people treat you differently. Prices go up, tradespeople are extremely expensive, and no one offers any kind of a discount. On the other hand, plumbers, carpenters, and salespeople who are cleared to work on club grounds are eager to do the work because they want a good reputation among your neighbors, who are ostensibly as well off as you are. Story 75. I grew up very poor and am now very comfortable. It surprised me how comfortable I became in wealthy circles. As a child and young adult, I was so uncomfortable in big fancy houses. I felt out of place and was always worried I would break something, even illogical things like light fixtures. Now I have a house I once would have called fancy, and I regularly visit colleagues in their million-dollar homes without blinking. I knew things would be easier but did not realize by how much. It is surprising how many problems money can solve. Almost all of them. Story 76. Not having to balance a checkbook is the biggest blessing of all. Story 77. Bro, that shit makes you feel free as fuck. The breeze is going to blow you down there. Story 78. How many thresholds are considered rich but are not that high? This usually takes the form of additional taxes or fees or leads to complete ineligibility. Story 79. I am wondering if I am spoiling my daughter and worrying that she may not learn the tough life lessons that come from poverty. Story 80. I have no idea how much gas costs in my city or the surrounding area. If I need gas, I just fill it up until the pump stops. I remember once checking my account balance and putting in $5 because it was all I could spare. It was mostly the same with groceries. For a while, I ate Kraft macaroni without milk and frozen chicken breasts. Story 81. Admire successful people but belittle those still striving. Story 82. I value automatic payments and understanding. I do not want a lot of stuff because I am not trying to impress anyone. Story 83. I went from a mostly well-off middle-class family to a permanently broke single man after university. Everything is fine until a car problem occurs. Then I am in a bad situation. No real help from anyone. I can either bite the bullet and take on more debt, take out a loan and increase my debt again, or give up on car repairs to save money. Then I have to tell my boss that my only means of transportation is gone and I live too far away for public transit. Story 84. I went from eating ramen with ketchup packets to ordering appetizers without checking the price. The biggest shock was realizing that rich people's problems are just as stupid, just more expensive. For example, the heated seats in my third car are on the fritz. Story 85. I have to ride the bus and walk everywhere now. Laughing out loud. Buying things is different since I have to consider what they actually cost versus what they are worth. Story 86. Honestly, it is much better than I expected. That sounds dumb, but I grew up very poor. I genuinely didn't know. I have always avoided dwelling on what I couldn't have because I believed I would always be poor and that those things weren't for me in this life. I try to keep some of that mindset because it could all go away at any time. My husband is the one who earns the most money. It is not me. I also feel self-conscious about it. I need to find people who are less judgmental about others' income because it is very trendy to criticize anyone who has more than you these days. I have heard many negative comments about people with retirement accounts, homeowners, or someone finally buying their first new car at 40. Those remarks are supposed to target the wealthy but in reality apply equally to most union households I know, and those are not the same. The people making those judgments are not interested in seeking the truth. They just want to attack people, to be honest. Story 87. Saving time and avoiding hassle is your main motivator now, not saving money. Paying extra to get it tomorrow sounds fine. Paying extra to go ahead is no problem. I can leave early because I don't need the money. I'm gone. Story 88. This is the small amount of tax you pay when you are wealthy. Most of your income comes from investments and is taxed much less than earned income. Story 89. I have not become very rich. I went from wondering where my next meal would come from as a child to owning a modest vacation home as an adult. The most jarring transition for me has been the decrease in stress. I vividly recall accidentally dropping and breaking a friend's casserole dish in high school, knowing my parents could not afford to replace it, and the shame and remorse that followed. Now I know that if an accident happens in my home, whether I need a new roof or my pet is ill, I can afford the costs without going into debt. It is a major relief. The shame, anxiety, and stress have decreased substantially, but now the keeping up with the Joneses feeling kicks in, creating pressure to have more, do more, and be more than before. I agree with other posts that there is a minimum amount of money needed to feel safe and secure, and after that it all feels about the same. Now I stress about bills related to my hobbies and vacations and about not being able to afford luxury purchases while colleagues and neighbors can. But that stress is much less than worrying about having clean clothes, eating each night, and having somewhere to live. Story 90. You become a spendthrift, and if you are not careful you will spend money on everything you want or on supporting your parents. You may think about investing but not act on it, and soon you will have exhausted your money with no returns. Story 91. I believe hot dogs are the best, and I will eat them anywhere. I also enjoy peanut butter to an extreme degree. There are some very boring people among both the rich and the poor. Being interesting is not a matter of wealth. Wealthy people are unappealing when they flaunt their wealth, and poor people are unappealing when they try to show off. Story 92. I ended a 7-year marriage and had to pick up from the beginning, living in a house without a bathroom or running water and working as a server to get by. I had a strong work ethic, and in 2 years I worked my way into a director position at a large clinic serving the state. Last month I bought a Toyota Tacoma on impulse to haul fuel because I live in a cold state. It is my third car. I also bought a house last November. It is hard to believe that I used to thrift for work-appropriate clothing and eat leftovers from my restaurant job. I still wear those thrifted clothes. I am grateful for the hard times because they made me appreciate what I worked for. Story 93. I have been rich and poor and I choose rich every fucking time. Story 94. I am not like that, but my sister is. Look at how much food she and her husband waste. When my wife and I eat out or cook, we eat the leftovers until they are gone. When my sister and her husband eat out or cook, they put the leftovers in the fridge, and if they do not eat them within a day or two, they throw them away. Story 95. I am from a poor, single-parent home. My wife comes from money. It is not just the spending habits that differ. When you grow up wealthy, you have gardeners and maids who clean up after you. You do not have to worry about doing the dishes or the laundry. Story 96. I was poor as a kid and became upper middle class as an adult. Life really changed. I was incredibly lucky. I went from relying on food banks to not worrying about the price of food, from wearing secondhand clothing to owning designer clothes, and from being stuck at home to becoming a world traveler. Story 97. Money changes stress faster than it changes your habits. Story 98. I went from being in school for almost 10 years, living off my parents, and working as a driver for Uber and Amazon intermittently to earning $200,000 a year. What surprised me most was that despite earning more, I still struggled with not having enough money. After 2 years, I realized that lacking money was not the problem. The problem was that I spent far too much. Story 99. Not driving a car that is old enough to vote, and never worrying about paying for anything that could go wrong. Story 100. What surprises me is that the next generation will never grasp how big the difference actually is. Story 101. Once survival is out of the game, money becomes an amplifier. It amplifies everything. Friends and influence. On a personal level, it amplifies how you feel, and it can backfire and make you more afraid. I met many ultra-rich people with various issues. Lose the money and your life hits the brakes. Friction appears everywhere. The things you attributed to your personality, like making things happen the way you want, vanish. Story 102. I am not rich, but when I went from broke and struggling to survive to comfortable, I was surprised by how much I value my comfort. People in the same bracket whom I confide in are sometimes miserable about their circumstances but fail to appreciate how good it is to have a shower, central heating, and the ability to choose what to eat. Story 103. I grew up poor, but it's the best feeling to turn left after boarding a plane. Story 104. You buy nicer versions of everything, and at the end of the day it's all shit. Nothing matters. Story 105. I supported myself for a decade and a half on a salary below $40,000. Now I make $90,000, all my bills are paid, but I still seem to live paycheck to paycheck. I can say the money I do not see is at least going into savings, but I still feel the pinch. Story 106. I received an unexpected inheritance and was able to buy a house outright after renting for 25 years despite having no savings. It has been 6 months and I am still struggling with the fact that I will never be kicked out by the landlord. I find myself saying it will do for now while I unpack because I expect to pack everything up again when someone wants to renovate. Story 107. When we became poor, the behavior of my relatives changed completely, and it put me into mild depression. I had been very naive before that. We bounced back. Now I know who is genuine, and we have cut all ties with the fake ones. Story 108. I grew up very poor, and what shocked me most as I got older was how quickly life can swing from barely surviving to completely losing everything. My parents were farmers, and one flood or one bad storm could erase months of work overnight. People often think poverty is a stable condition, but it is extremely fragile. One disaster and you are right back at zero no matter how hard you work. Story 109. I grew up very poor, remained so until age 25, and became a millionaire before 30. 1. Everywhere you go, there you are. Money gives you the chance to be the fullest version of yourself. For some people that means they withdraw. For others it means they pursue intense hobbies. Regardless, rich you or poor you, you are still you. Once money removes practical problems and hardships, what remains are the issues money cannot solve, which are often the most unsettling. I have seen many wealthy people die alone, hating their lives and regretting what they did to get there. If you are on the rise, get therapy. 2. I was shocked by how the fairy tale of make it, buy your mother a house, and hire your friends actually plays out. I have been in this position for about 10 years. People's perceptions of why I have money and they do not, even after I try to help, have cost me close friends, forced me to write off family members, and made my life lonelier. 3. I still have gas station anxiety. Every time I fill my tank, for a moment I worry that my card will be declined. Every time I have a full grocery cart, I worry that I cannot afford what is in it and that I will be embarrassed at the cashier's checkout. 4. It took me about 4 years of having everything to mostly stop coveting things. As someone who grew up poor, that is strange to say. But owning things becomes a drag when you can buy anything you want. The sense of security and status from owning things diminishes quickly when you must store and maintain a vast collection of once-in-a-lifetime purchases that nobody else cares about. 5. Money can increase happiness until it does not. Wealth can distract you from a certain kind of existential dread, and years of isolation can make that worse. It is easy to see how many wealthy people become out of touch and develop resentment or even fear of the working class. 6. The best thing I ever did was focus on building a longer table rather than taller walls. I spent years giving money to anyone who asked. donating to charities, angel investing in friends' projects, and so on. Now I set more boundaries because I have children to save for and raise, but I do not feel the selfish guilt that many in my position feel. That guilt drives a lot of wealthy people crazy. 7. After years of doing this, everyone in my city knows me or knows of me, and I have built a lot of goodwill that will positively impact my family's life. If you mishandle it, it can turn sour, but when it works, it feels like the most wholesome, leave it to beaver outcome you can imagine. The gratitude can be overwhelming. I often try to leave before people find out I did something nice for them. Strangers approaching you with tears in their eyes while you are eating can be intense. 9. If you can afford it, attend regular therapy. 10. Can be fun to use your money to do unusual things. A few years ago, I tried to generate international earned media out of boredom. With budgets between $2,000 and $10,000, I was able to do it repeatedly. 11. Like many children in America, I grew up obsessed with the Guinness Book of World Records and wanted to be first at something or make the history books. One of the most personally satisfying uses of my money to date was engineering a unique superlative so I could forever claim to be the first at something. This got long. Have a good day. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.